Psalms chapter 84 and verse 10. For a day in thy courts is better than 1,000. So one day in the kingdom of heaven is better than 1,000 of your best days on this side, man. Let me repeat that again. One single day in the kingdom of heaven is better than 1,000 of your best days on this side, man. Okay? Where things were better for you. Moments that you can reminisce on and say, yeah, that was a good day. The kingdom of heaven blows it out the park, man. It blows it out the water. Just one day. Not to mention, the Heavenly Father, He's going to stretch out the time. He's going to expand the time so you can enjoy your immortality. You can enjoy your life. And the Lord said in Wisdom of Solomon, He created the Israelite man to be an image of his own eternity, man. We're going to be a likeness of his own eternity, man. We're going to be many most highs, man. We're going to be many most highs. Okay? God's on earth under Yahweh Shemiah Shah.
I have said, ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High.
And also what's going to make us gods? These laws, statutes, commandments, and us judging by the laws, statutes, commandments, but also these laws being in our inward parts, making us those perfect judges. Not to mention, we experience these different reincarnations in this wicked flesh, so we know how to judge the flesh. We know how to judge this body because we've been in this body many times. Okay? But once again, the kingdom of heaven is going to be patterned after the mind of Yahweh Shemiah Shah, man. A righteous paradigm.
Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, in earth as it is in heaven.
All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shah, Bahashem, Kakodash. Double honors unto the apostles and the elders of the GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples to us younger brothers, and peace and blessings and salutations to the whole lake out there pushing the word and truth and in sincerity across the four winds in the name of Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shah, pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful elect, the believers, the listeners who have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh Bahashem Shah. All right. And what I want to get into today, dealing with the Middle East, Saga explained, I came across this video, how the US stole the Middle East. All right, and it's from this guy Johnny Harris. He's pretty informative. I like the way that he does, his documentaries, and they're to the point and they're very informative. He has a way, of conveying, information, that I think is easy to understand. So I want to go into some things, some things, he's surface level on, and we're going to, dive into those things and bridge those gaps. And Lord will, this lesson is edifying because we know, that this war, all right, that, we await, all right, this third world war, what is going to kick off in the Middle East. Okay. And we're going to see in this video how America got so entangled, within the Middle East. Okay. And it's going to show you, all right, that these devils, have, been on both sides, okay, of everything that we see happening. The villains, that they show you, all right, on Western media, well, they're creations of America mainly through CIA. Okay. But then, when they go rogue or when they have no use for them, all right, they turn them into villains, all right, to forward, America hegemony, okay, in their region, which is the Middle East. Okay. So let's start off here with this precept, okay, and then we'll get into all right the lesson itself. Okay, when you go here to Habakkuk 2 verses 4, it says Habakkuk 2 and 4 said, "Behold, his soul, which is lifted up, is not upright in him." And this is speaking of Esau, all right, the nation of Edom. Okay, and mainly with the elites, all right, the movers and shakers of this society, all right, the kings of this current beast system that runs the earth. Okay, and it says, "But the just, which is the elect, shall live by faith." Okay, because we're behind enemy lines and we're in our enemy's kingdom where this man has been exalted. Okay, and we have to live by faith. You know that the Lord is going to overcome this devil, man. You know, because this devil, has been given the earth. The earth has been given in his hand. Okay, but we have faith that the Lord is going to remove, okay, this man's authority out of the earth. Now you get this word upright in the Hebrew, okay, which is Yashar, all right, or Yashar one, okay, which means upright one, all right. But you go to the word Yashar, and it says to be right, to be straight, to be just, okay, to be level, to be lawful, to be smooth, okay, to be agreeable, to be straightforward. And this is the opposite of the devil. That's why I said the soul that is in him is not upright. Okay, so this man is not straightforward. All right, everything is extremely, deceptive, cunning and crafty. Okay, he doesn't do anything lawful. Okay, he's not just, he's not level. Okay, and this is how this man runs the earth. Okay, and you'll look at things, and if you just looked at Western media, okay, you'll be completely confused. If you, all right, only watch Western media, everything you believe is a lie. All right, you live in a reality that doesn't exist. Okay, and this how this man runs the earth. He portrays a character of being this, this caring humanitarian, and he's all about life and forwarding people, and he's always trying to bring peace, and he's always at war with terrorism and all these different things, but it's a lie. Okay, it's not straightforward. Okay, so when you go to Habakkuk 2 and 5, all right, it says, yeah, also because he transgresses by wine, he is a proud man, neither keep it at home. Okay, and this man, all right, is a wanderer. Going back to Cain, okay, he's a wandering weapon. Okay, go back to Tubal Cain, all right, which Cain goes into, dagger. Okay, well, this man is a walking, all right, he's a traveling weapon throughout the earth. He can't stay at home. Who enlarges his desire is hell, and is his death, and cannot be satisfied, but gather unto him all nations, and heap it unto him all people. Okay, so this man, we were the first people, that he conquered when he came back into power during the Renaissance. Okay, but it didn't stop with us. Now there's emphasis on us because of who we are. Okay, and he puts emphasis on the hell that he puts on us. Okay, and this man puts hell on the earth. Okay, and the problem that the Lord has is the hell that he put on us, man. Okay, and the Lord is a just power. He's gonna let these nations get at Esau before he's removed. Okay, but this man, he took the show. What he did to us, he took that show on the road. Okay, and did it to the earth. Okay, and has heaped unto himself all people, man. He has colonized the earth. Okay, he has enslaved, he has put all these governments in debt. All right, the governments of most of the governments of the earth are sold out unto him, some more than others. Okay, and when he sells out your government, then he has the people. Okay, so this is what this man, has done. All right, real time, and we're living in the midst of it. This is what Yahweh Shai is coming, to overturn in the earth. Now, I want to get, to this video. Okay, uh, uh, so yeah, this is fair use. I'm not making any, monetary gains or profits. Okay, from this video, just for educational purposes only. Fair use, fair use. Okay, so he's going to go into it and break some things down. So we'll commentate, and fill in the blanks with a few things. And brothers got precepts, feel free to add. As if any points come to mind. All right, as he's talking. Okay, but we're gonna play this, and we'll add as needed.
The Middle East, the part of Asia that Europeans see as the middle of what they see as the East. Sort of arbitrary, whatever. We call it the Middle East. This part of the world is literally where civilization started, right here in modern-day Iraq. And over the years, the borders here have been redrawn many times as empires have ebbed and...
And we know, that civilization started in the Garden East, okay, in Eden, which is over here in America. I mean, not America, in Israel, okay, what's called Israel today, okay. This is where everything started, the center of the earth. This is where Adam, okay, was at, when he was given that breath. All right. Now you have these ancient empires, that started what they call the Fertile Crescent. Okay, you go back to Samaria, okay, ancient Babylonian, under Nimrod. Okay, the Syrian Empire, they all, had this region of the earth, what is, modern day Syria, Jordan, Iraq, okay, these, Iran, okay, the Persian Empire. Now they rule mainly out of this, region, which is known as the Fertile Crescent, okay. So, but, we know civilization started, all right, in the garden, all right.
and flowed through this region. By the way, I didn't make this time lapse. A very talented YouTuber did, and he deserves a medal for it. Or perhaps just a new patron. Thanks, man. Anyway, the most recent carving up of this region happened by European powers. The French, the British, the Russians. I mean, are we surprised? No. Like, of course it was the British. Of course it was the French. Of course it was Europeans. Of course. The lines they drew didn't really take into account language or ethnicity or regional identity. They just sort of sliced it all up amongst themselves and said, these are our new regions of power in the Middle East. Eventually, those European powers left, but the lines they drew stuck around and became the skeleton for what the borders look like today. And this is where our story starts. In the 1930s, here in the modern Middle East. At this point, across the ocean, there was this growing superpower that had spent the last century moving west, taking over this whole continent and beyond deep into the Pacific Ocean. We've talked about that a bit. But things were changing. The world had just fought a brutal world war that was fought with new weapons that were powered by this new important substance, oil. Germany lost that war, in part because they didn't have access to enough oil to keep up with this new style of warfare that relied a lot more on machines. The young superpower realized that access to this stuff would determine who would be powerful and who would not. So they stopped looking west for a moment and turned east, with hopes of finding the fuel they needed to build their power. The US presence in the Middle East started with one little dot, right here. But soon that dot would expand into a sprawling network of alliances, covert attacks, flows of weapons, money, and the building of innumerable bases, and eventually turning into full-on ground wars. This is how the US stole the Middle East.
Ready and willing to employ all means necessary.
Okay, so it's the 1930s, and the US doesn't have a significant presence in the Middle East at this point. But that's about to change because there's a company based in California that wants to explore this vast desert for oil.
11,000 miles from San Francisco, there lies a primeval desert, a mass of drifting sand and sun-baked earth, 1/3 the size of the United States.
This was sort of a risky decision for the California company because, first off, they had no idea if there was actually any oil here.
They knew it would mean sinking into the desert the money of thousands of stockholders in a project that might well end in complete loss.
And second off, this desert was a part of a very hardcore religious kingdom.
The fact that Mecca is the source and the shrine of Islam gives Saudi Arabia a central place in the Islamic and therefore the Arab world.
That was home to the holiest sites in Islam, run by a dogmatic royal family that did not like outsiders, especially non-believing Westerners. But even still, the king of the Desert Kingdom eventually gives the California company permission to explore almost 1 million square kilometers of this desert looking for oil. And after a few years, the bet paid off. And on March 3rd, 1938, in this little patch of coastal desert, they struck gold. Well, actually, they struck oil, but it might as well have been gold. So throughout the 30s and 40s, American oil executives, workers, and their families started flocking to the Middle East, establishing the first significant American presence in the region. They set up little cities around the oil operation that were little slices of America, full of the deepest sinful behavior, like allowing women to drive and the consumption of alcohol.
Here's another American colony, complete with air-conditioned houses, 2 hospitals, and an outdoor movie theater.
This is the sort of stuff that is very off limits in Saudi Arabia. It's literally illegal at this point. So you have a lot of Saudis who are not happy about their government letting the Americans in to behave however they want. But the oil kept flowing. And soon the US government goes to the royal family and says, listen, the oil is flowing better than ever. This is awesome. How about we build a little military base attached to our little oil city so that we can, protect you and protect us and protect the oil and stuff. And the Saudis are like, okay, having the great Satan come to our country for oil is one thing, but letting them set up a full-on military base on our soil, and especially when everyone in our country is not happy with their presence in the first place. But, said the royal family, all of this oil is really valuable and it's really nice and we're getting super rich. So they're like, yeah, sure, set up the base. But there was one stipulation that the Saudis had for the Americans. You are not allowed to literally plant a flag, no flagpoles of the United States. You cannot put your flag anywhere on this base. Instead, you can put a little plaque on the side of the building so that your flag is not literally on our soil. And that was the deal. And that's exactly what happened. The US sets up its first military operation in the Middle East in the form of a landing strip that is right next to this oil field. Okay, so all of this infrastructure that the Americans were building required someone to build it. They needed a construction company. And there was one construction company that the Americans really liked that helped them build their oil city and their base. This company was founded and run by a guy named Mohammed. Now listen, do you think I'm really giving you the backstory on the construction company that built the air base in the oil city just because that's interesting and I like to talk about construction? No, this is actually very relevant to the story, and you will see why very soon. So the Americans and the Saudis are having this forbidden oil bromance, and it's going really well, and the oil is flowing, everyone's getting rich. And meanwhile, the rest of the Middle East is looking at Saudi Arabia and they're like, dude, WTF, why are you in bed with America? And why are you letting them set up a landing strip in your country? And the Saudi royals are like, do you realize how rich we're getting right now? If you were in our position, you would do the same thing, Egypt. Okay, so it's the 1950s, and let's get back to Mohammed, the construction guy. His company, by this point, is thriving. The American presence in oil land is just exploding, and he is building all of the stuff for it. And so this guy has a giant business. And he starts to have children. Well, in fact, he had a lot of children, 54 children, because he had 22 wives, because that is a thing in Saudi Arabia to this day. Anyway, the point is, one of Mohammed's sons is named Osama.
So now it's getting interesting, So just to sum up what he's been going into, because it was Esau, all right, that struck oil over there in Saudi Arabia, okay, and you had the company Aramco, okay, which was a American company, all right, but it was on Saudi Arabia, land. So the Saudis, began getting the cut, off their oil because it was on their land. All right, but it was America that founded, these oil, all right, refineries, okay, in Saudi Arabia. Now, America has, a lot of oil, okay? But the things is there's different type of oils. And the oil that America has, okay, and that it you know the oil rigs, okay, the different places where they drill, and get oil in America. Well, America can't use that oil, okay? The oil that America needs comes from those countries in, the Middle East, and America uses, Canada oil, okay? But American oil itself, is not, they're usable here, So Trump was saying, drill, baby, drill. Well, you can drill all you want. America doesn't have the infrastructure to refine, the oil, okay, that it drills, okay? And that's why, they make sure they have a foothold, okay, in their region of the earth that's oil rich, okay? Syrian oil, you have particular, American troops that are, guarding, okay, Syrian oil bases now, okay? And their oil is coming back here, to run, okay, America, because each nation, it takes, a certain amount of oil, okay, to run, and power, nations, okay? And that's why, Iranian oil, is good for Russia and China. And that's why, they have so much interest in Iran, because the oil from Iran, powers China, okay, which is a heavy ally, to Russia, okay? So it's all interlinked, when you go into, the narrative of their region, and oil plays a major part. All right. And now, this construction, all right, tycoon, okay, Mohammed bin Laden is the father, okay, of Osama bin Laden. Okay. So Osama bin Laden, he's, a child, okay, of, what was happening. He's a product of what was happening between, the Americans and the Saudis, dealing with this oil. His father, being the the guy that owned the construction company that did the infrastructure, all right, for these oil rigs, all right, and these oil refineries and the infrastructure that America needed. Okay. It's all interconnected, man. So let's play some more.
I told you this was going to be relevant. Okay, a reminder that Saudi Arabia is not the entire Middle East. So I'm going to leave the Osama bin Laden cliffhanger for a moment to tell you what else was going on in the Middle East at this time. Remember that it was the hunt for oil that brought the US to Saudi Arabia originally. But now, in the 50s and 60s, there was a new reason for the US to think about the Middle East. And that reason is because there's another big superpower that has nuclear weapons called the Soviet Union, who is coming into the region and saying to everyone, come join Team Communism. And the US is like, hold my beer. So in addition to oil, the US is now involved in trying to not let the Soviet Union have any power in this region. Over in Iran, there was a democratically elected leader that the US didn't like. They thought he was maybe a little too friendly with the Soviet Union. So they worked together with the British to literally overthrow the government of Iran so that they could install a dictatorial leader that was more friendly to the United States. Little side note here, the airport that I fly out of here in DC is named after the guy who gave the go-ahead for this coup in Iran, John Foster Dulles. So I'm reminded of the whole Iran thing every time I fly. So the US has its oil thing. It's now involved in trying to prop up a dictator in Iran. There's another big thing happening that brings the US into the region, which is that the newly declared state of Israel is starting to piss off its neighbors and starting to look to the US for support. And the US gladly offers it, seeing Israel as a friendly nation in the region that could be a big proponent of US interests. So the US starts to fund Israel with tons of money and fighter jets and all of these things to help them fight their wars against their Arab neighbors. There was a debate happening in the United States on whether or not they should actually do all of this to support Israel so intensely, because they knew if they did, they were going to piss off all of the neighbors in the Middle East.
So even what we see now, these small heads dragging America into this latest conflict. This is nothing new. Small heads have been, dragging America, into these conflicts in this region. Okay, because these small heads are nothing but a satellite state. All right, for the West, it's a military, okay, outpost. For okay, it's a military colony. Okay, for these European nations in America. Okay, and as you can see, America is just all intertwined. That's why we open up. He can never keep it at home. Okay, this man is all intertwined in all the political, the family affairs, the government affairs. Okay, the wars, the resources. He's intertwined in everything, man. Okay, so this is what Rome, would do. The Roman Empire was known to, meddle in the affairs, okay, of other so-called sovereign, governments. Okay, that's why you look at how Rome played a major part. When it came to Egypt. When it came to who was in power in Egypt. You look at Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. Okay, how they play a role in setting up different powers and governments in Egypt. Okay, even in Judea. That's why you had the high priest. That would be set up. Okay, by the Roman government. Okay, the Sanhedrin, they answered to the Roman, government, even when we was in that land. Okay, and so forth and so on. But the thing is, you see just how America just intertwined in Iran, then overthrew, the elected, prime minister of Iran. They overthrew him and put up an American puppet. Okay, then they jump over here to, the conflict between these small hats and their neighbors. Okay, and then they still have, the oil thing going on with the Saudis. Okay, so this man is everywhere and in everything, man. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked, man. Okay, so let's keep playing it.
And all of the neighbors are the ones who had the oil. In the end, the US did decide to support Israel. And with that came a major backlash from all of these oil producing countries in the neighborhood.
It is a crisis of such proportion that we probably haven't even begun to grasp it yet as far as the country is concerned.
Scenes like this are becoming all too common on both sides of the Atlantic. But for America, they are more ominous. They tell the Arabs that their oil weapon is wounding America, the country that supports and supplies their enemy Israel.
Eventually, this backlash against supporting Israel kind of calmed down. There was some peace talks. And anyway, let's get back to Mohammed, the construction guy, and his son Osama, because this is where it really starts to heat up.
And it is this world of religious authority and deeply rooted traditions that is now being challenged by the wealth of oil and the Western invasion it has brought.
So it's now the 70s, and Mohammed bin Laden, the construction guy, is now insanely rich. His construction company is giant, his 54 children are also rich, and his son Osama is growing up. and he's in his 20s and is looking around at all of this stuff happening in Iran and in Israel and is starting to feel really
Oh, Salaki, I forgot to unmute myself. Yeah, so just summing it up real quick, as he mentioned that you had the gas crisis, okay, in America because America supported, Israel in their war against, some of his neighbors, okay, those Arabs, and they put an embargo on oil going to America, which caused a shortage. And what happened, you had Henry Kissinger, that demon, which we went into him before. You can look him up. All right. But he went and struck a deal with the Saudis. And that's where you get the birth for the petrodollar, to where they only took American dollars, for their oil. Okay. And what they did was, they gave credibility to the dollar. They gave stability to the dollar. Okay. Because a few years prior, Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard, okay, and then oil, became a new, stabilizer for the dollar, okay. And these countries, they had to buy, oil, from these OPEC countries in dollars, and America, became pretty much the bodyguard for the Saudis. They would start giving them arms and, being, a presence in their region, protecting, the assets of the Saudis. Okay. And so after the petrodollar was created, okay, now, all right, you're going to see the the ongoing power struggle, between Russia, okay, and America, which then it was a USSR, okay, because since the end of World War II, okay, and America was established as a superpower, well, you still had the USSR, as a threat to challenge, America's superpower status. All right. And a lot of the wars that we see happen after World War II were proxy wars, okay, between America and Russia. Okay. So you're going to see, bin Laden, come on the scene, and he's caught in between, the conflict of America and Russia, and he's trying to play both sides, because a lot of these characters, they're used, they're trained, by the CIA, they go rogue. All right, it's a thing that you call blowback, which we'll get into that. I got that definition pulled up, but it's a thing that you call blowback, which is a CIA term, from certain things that they do a few years down the line, a decade, years or whatever, you'll have what you call blowback, things that they intend to happen, will happen. Okay, someone bin Laden, he was one of those things, and like I say, he was a tool used, okay, by the West, okay, against Russia, okay, but he really didn't like either one of them, okay, so they'll go rogue. All right, and we don't know, the details of how much they go rogue or how much they was, you know, bought in. Okay, but we know, okay, that these villains, okay, were created and trained, okay, by Western powers. Okay, so let's let it play some more.
Really uncomfortable with the notion of his family being so supportive of American presence in the Middle East and his government, this religious kingdom, home of Mecca and Medina, being so okay with the U.S. so embedded in the Middle East at this point. These are ancient holy lands. Why is my government and my family supporting this great Satan superpower coming in and becoming so involved in the Middle East? So bin Laden sets out on a lifelong quest to fight back against these superpowers, not just the US, but also the Soviet Union, invading the Middle East. He heads to Afghanistan, where the Soviet Union is invading Afghanistan, trying to take it over. Bin Laden wants to fight back. By the way, the same year in Iran, that dictator that the US put in gets overthrown in a giant religious revolution that gets rid of the old dictator that the US liked and puts in a religious government headed by this guy, Ayatollah Khomeini. This new government takes a bunch of Americans hostage and starts off hating the United States. And I mean, can you blame them? If someone overthrew the person I elected, I would be pretty pissed too. So anyway, back to bin Laden. Here.
So even the problem with Iran, you know, this is a monster that America created, you know, because they overthrew, you know, their legit, you know, prime minister that they had, all right, a democratically elected, you know, official. They overthrew him, okay, and set up a dictator, okay, and you had a religious revolution in Iran, okay, and they overthrew their dictator, okay, and they placed, okay, a religious leader, okay, that what you call the supreme leader today, you know, the Ayatollah, okay. That's why Iran is known as what, Islamic Republic, okay. You know, they govern, you know, their country, you know, by the Quran, okay. That's why, you know, women, you know, there's certain rules for women, certain rules for men, okay. You know, mosque, you know, was mandatory in particular things. So now they have, you know, Islamic Republic, which, you know, this is a monster that America created, you know, because they tampered in, you know, their government, okay. And now Iran has become, you know, a formidable power in their region today, you know, fast forward to today, okay. But it started from American tampering, okay, that created the monster of Iran that we see today, okay. And now he's going to go back to bin Laden.
He arrives to Afghanistan with a few things. Number one, a bunch of money. Remember, his family is like super rich. He also comes with construction infrastructure because he's like a construction guy. Like his family knows construction and infrastructure building. But most importantly, he comes with an obsessive dedication to fighting back against any superpower that is invading the Middle East. So Osama joins in with all of these rebel fighters who are fighting back against the Soviet Union. And they fight a long, brutal war. By the way, the US was secretly loving this, loving that the Soviet Union was getting like beat back by these like rebel fighters. So they end up sending loads of weapons and money and support to these fighters, something that will come back to bite them a few decades later. Eventually, Osama and the Afghan fighters beat back the Soviet Union. It was 10 brutal years of war, and by the end, these fighters were battle-hardened. Osama was now completely dedicated to his cause of fighting back against superpowers who were coming into the Middle East. So he returns back to Saudi Arabia, where he starts raising money and awareness for his new group that he started while he was in Afghanistan. It's called Al-Qaeda. And the mission of the group is to protect Islam through violently striking back against big superpowers coming into the Middle East. And Saudi Arabia's like, Osama, like, do you have to do this, dude? Do you realize how rich we're getting? Like, Saudi princes are living on yachts in the south of France and like flying in their private jets. And they're like, dude, chill. Like, it's fine. We get it. We don't like the United States, but like, can you like maybe chill? Our partnership with the United States is actually turning out to be really great. And I know, yeah, they're really into Israel and they're really bad and everything, but like they buy our oil and they give us weapons and we're like doing just fine over here. Osama doesn't chill, and the Saudi government eventually takes away his passport, not letting him leave, and told him to hush up with all the anti-American holy war talk. So Osama finds another plan to maybe win back the heart of the royals. Saudi Arabia has a next-door neighbor named Iraq who was run by Saddam Hussein, who Osama sees as a really bad Muslim, totally secular and brutal, and he's just like not a good guy. Saddam is also cashing in on the oil boom. He's building big palaces and statues of himself all over the country. Oh yeah, and he also used the oil money to build a giant army, like the fourth biggest in the world. With this massive army, Saddam decided that he could maybe multiply his oil reserves if he popped down to invade this little tiny country of Kuwait, where there's also loads of oil. This sort of freaked the Saudis out. If Saddam, with his giant army, could grab Kuwait, what would stop him from marching right across this desert into Saudi Arabia? So there's this moment that it's like the moment of infamy of this whole thing, where Osama goes to the Saudis and he says,
I volunteer as tribute.
He doesn't actually say I volunteer in tribute. That was Hunger Games.
I believe we have a volunteer.
But he effectively says, I have me and my battle-hardened men who like can go in and fight against Saddam and defend the kingdom. And the Saudis are like, no, we're not gonna like let this ragtag group of like rebel fighters fight off the fourth largest army in the world. And Osama's like, well, we beat the Soviets. Like, they're a big army with nuclear weapons and everything. And the Saudis are like, yeah, because you hid in the hills in caves in Afghanistan. Prince Sultan literally told bin Laden verbatim, quote, there are no caves in Kuwait. And then he asks them, what will you do when he lobs the missiles at you with chemical and biological weapons? Osama's response, we will fight them with our faith. And the Saudis are like, awkward? Sorry, dude. Like, instead, the king met with somebody else that he thought would make a much better fit than bin Laden and his faith fighters. Dick Cheney had flown to Saudi Arabia the day after Saddam had invaded Kuwait. At this point, the bromance between the US and Saudi Arabia had cooled a little bit, as Saudi had gotten more and more flack for being in bed with the US. But even despite this, he told Cheney to come with as much force and as quickly as he could. And that is exactly what Dick Cheney did.
Ready and willing to employ all means necessary.
The US went insane here. They recruited 37 other countries, and then they sent more firepower in terms of ships and bombers and troops and all this stuff than you and I could ever imagine. It was insanity. And they totally crushed Saddam. Within a few weeks, they had pushed Saddam back and completely won over the hearts of the royals. The bromance is back in business. So now you
Now, like I said, he stays surface level on this because what we have to understand, even with Saddam Hussein, all right, when Iran overthrew, okay, that puppet, that Western puppet that was in power, the Shah, okay, and you had American hostages, in the embassy, and you had the whole big thing with that, and America, okay, supplied, Saddam Hussein's Iraq, okay, with weaponry, because those chemical weapons that he was speaking of, well, they got those from the West, okay, and they was using it on Iran, when they had a war with Iran, from 79, from 70, from 79, okay, almost until, 1990, okay. So America funded, okay, the Iraq military, okay. Saddam didn't just get, the fourth largest military in the West and he had nothing to say about it. No, they helped him build that military because they used him as a proxy against Iran. Okay, so they created the boogeyman of Saddam Hussein. Okay, they created the West. So now they're using Saddam Hussein to scare the Saudis, okay, of an invasion, okay. And as they use Saddam, to scare the Saudis into an invasion, guess what? They come in and play the hero because they wanted to go into Iraq anyway. Okay, so that's what you get. That's where you get Desert Storm from. That military, that war, okay, against Iraq, okay, in 1990. Okay, so now, all right, America, has a reason to build more, military bases in this region. Okay, to have an excuse to, destabilize, okay, more of these countries in this region. Okay, while they have, a foothold, okay, in all this oil rich, region of the earth, man. Okay, so let's play some more.
Now you have these Saudis that are beaming at the Americans for helping them fight off Saddam. And you have a bunch of bases that the US set up to mount this attack. Way more than before. The US came with all of this firepower and manpower and bases and artillery, and then they just sort of never left. Something that really pissed off a lot of Saudis who were very uncomfortable with US presence to begin with. But the guy who was most pissed off than anyone in the Middle East at this point, Osama bin Laden, who had not only been rejected by his own country, but then who got chosen instead, but the great Satan, the United States, a power that Osama had built his entire life fighting against. So Osama bin Laden starts to double down on his original mission. He leaves Saudi Arabia and begins coordinating very precise attacks that could really only be coordinated by a guy who was good at technical details of a construction company and who had lots of money to fund it. He carries out attacks against the United States all around the world. And by the late 90s, he starts planning the attack that would change our world forever.
We're setting up an ad hoc.
So this is just the first half of the story. What happens next is something that we're all kind of familiar with. In fact, I think we're all still kind of processing the US presence in the Middle East today and how that all went down. But it deserves taking a look at, and I'm not going to do that right now. I want to make a separate video for Iraq and Afghanistan and Israel and Iran and dive into each of these cases to show how the US presence in the Middle East is not just about oil. In fact, oil is becoming less and less of a vital aspect of the US presence as we have alternative sources of this sort of energy. Instead, our presence in the Middle East has become a fixture of how we think about foreign policy and how we think about the map. It's become so embedded in our military doctrine and in our foreign policy doctrine that it's proving to be really hard to think about how we could ever get out.
Yeah, and that's why they call these wars in the Middle East forever wars. Okay, so yeah, he got some more. He breaks down Iraq, Iran, and Afghanistan separately. So our brothers, I can watch them and see, if they video worthy, But he made a lot of points. But let's go here. So let's go into the scriptures, a few scriptures and close out, because when you read the book of Psalm 7 and 11, it's in the NLT. It said the Most High is the honest judge. He is angry with the wicked every day. And who is the wicked? Esau, Edom. Okay, and the Lord is angry at this man, every single day, because this man, he doesn't go a day without being everything that the Lord hates. Okay, it says if a person does not repent, the Most High will sharpen his sword, which are the nukes. Okay, he will bend and screen his bow. Okay, which is those launchers. Okay, for those nukes. All right. So this is what the Lord is at with it. The Lord is going to show his displeasure with Esau and his rulership in this third world war. Okay, and his tampering in the Middle East is leading him to this third world war. Okay, which now we know is he, is tampering with Iran. All right, and when he fully comes into their door, when America fully comes into their door and fully engages into a war with Iran, all right, it's going to lead, to the America being the desert, those small hats being obliterated, okay, and these nations are in full blown war, and Yahweh Shai returns, man. Okay, it says he will prepare his deadly weapons and shoot his flaming arrows. All right, the nukes. The wicked conceive evil. Okay, they are pregnant with trouble and give birth to lies, man. And this is what these devils do. Okay, they plot and they scheme, evil, wickedness. Okay, and it gives birth, to trouble and lies. Okay, and that's why you have, the non-stop war. Okay, the famines that they cause throughout the earth, the poverty, that American sanctions cause throughout the earth, man. That's why it's going to be so bad in America, man, because the American government has done the earth bad, man. You know, it says they dig a deep pit to trap others, then fall into it themselves. Yeah, so that pit that they dug in the Middle East, okay, that shit show that they created in the Middle East, what they call the Middle East, which is really, Western Asia, all right. But what they call the Middle East, the pit that they've dug, they're gonna fall into it. Because like I said, when America, fully engages Iran, okay, and this all out war, you see, that's gonna be the war that ends Esau's empire. Okay, so everything that he's done over there to fuel his empire, okay, is going to work against him in these last days. Okay, it said the trouble they make for others backfires on them. The violence, all right, they plan falls on their own heads. I will thank the Lord because he is just. I will sing praise to the name of the Lord, Yahweh Shem Al Shah, the Most High. And ultimately that's going to be us on those chariots, singing and celebrating, okay, the victory, okay, over Esau Edom, the destruction of this man's empire, okay, the lake of fire, you know, that's going to be that time. All right. So, yeah, I just wanted to get into that. I believe the point was made, so I watch, especially with the things that's going on now, because there's so much misinformation, out there about, the things that's going on, with those affairs over there in the Middle East, so if we can, we're going to keep, making sense of it, and filter these things through the scripture, okay, and according to prophecy. So, Lord will you brothers, all right, and you sisters edified. Till next time, I want to say Shalom, Kwam Yashala, Abba, DTA soon, Shalom.